Nam Sharadava Nalalida Loka Aya Karuna Gana Ganatam Asakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gurashi Charunaravrindam Anavasya Vande Gurashi Charunaravrindam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Ramadhyam Manasurasena Panchakampasu Taranga Bhajo Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramarjanado Yuktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatape Vande Gurashi Charanaravind Durvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasad Iptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Vaivatrupti Vajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravind Radhikama Gabayara Param Madhura Leela Gunarupa Namna Shira Madhura Pratikshana Swa Dhanalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Kunjayuno Ratikeli Siddhai দয়ালিভের যুক্তির অপেক্ষণীয় ছাত্রাতি দক্ষ অতি বলবস্য বন্দে গুরাশি চরণর বৃন্দ ধরিত্বেন সমস্ত শাস্ত্রে रुक्तास्तथाव यतैव साधवे किन्तु प्रवर्ज प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरविन्दम् Ya prasadam Bhagavad prasadam Ya prasadam Nagati kutapi Jayam stuvam tasya Yasatrin sanyam Vande Gurushi Charanara vrindam Vande Gurushi Charanara vrindam Vande Gurushi Charanara vrindam Nama Om Vishnu Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pachatari Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Yaraye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath, Madana Mohan, Chaitanya Nityananda, Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava, Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan, Bhattaraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta, Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe Jayo Jagannath Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Jaya Lakshman Hanuman Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jayo Prahlad Mara Netai Gaura Haribo 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 Netai Gaur Haribo Netai Gaur Netai Gaura Brahman Jai Vishnu Par Param Sattva His divine grace of Goswami Prabhu ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai, Param Dayal Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Jai, Bhakti Sarva Vikna Vinashana Krishna Hare Bhagavan ki jai. Shri Mathura Dharani ki jai. Samaveta Jai Gaurari Pramanandi Haribo.
हिरण्यकाशी पूर्वक्षः तिलतङ्कार्णखालाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बहिर्नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नका अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज नित्य गौरा हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नरसिंहदेव
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियाशी नमो नमः। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी। મારા શરણાલય તારા વંશા પૂર્ણ હોય। ખોરી ખોરો તારે વૃંદાવનવાસી। રહે અભિલાષ વિલાસ કુંજે દિયોવા। નયને હેરીવો સદા યુગલ રૂપ રાશી। હે નિવેદન ધાર સખેર અનુગાત કર। દેવાધિકાર ધીએ કર નિજ દાસી। કૃષ્ણ દાસે ખોએ નમો રાય। શ્રી રાધા ગોવિંદ પ્રેમે સદાય ન ભાષી। શ્રી રાધા ગોવિંદ પ્રેમે સદાય ન ભાષી। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. जय तुलसी महारानी, जय वृंदा देवी, तुलसी महारानी, जय वृंदा देवी. जय वृंदे, जय वृंदे, जय वृंदे, जय वृंदे.
I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he's relishing mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzed as that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day I should offer my respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai, Shvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Chintamani Satmasakalpa Vriksha Lakshar Pradesus Kavira Vikal Paliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Sambrama Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Gwanantam Aravinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpa Koti Niya Vishesha Sobham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvana Malyavansi Ratnam Yudam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shyamam Jibangalalitam Yatapakasam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Ajutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhaktu Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsada Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Somuni Pungamanam Sopyastiyat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tattve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Eko Yasora Chayatam Jagananda Kotim Yaschaktirasti Jagananda Chayayadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyomanajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktaryameva Nikama Suktaryameva Nikama Pratitaistuvanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, verse number 32. Yadaiti Sangata Bhava Bhutendriya Manuguna Yadayatana Nirmane Nasekur Brahmavittama. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The different types of bodily construction of the living entities are exactly like different types of motor cars manufactured by assembling the allied motor parts. When the car is ready, the driver sits in the car and moves it as he desires. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 1861. The living entity is as if seated on the machine of the body, and the car of the body is moving by the control of material nature, just as the railway trains are moving under the direction of the controller. The living entities, however, are not the bodies. They are separate from the cars of the body. But the less intelligent material scientists cannot understand the process of assembling the parts of the body, namely the senses, the mind, and the qualities of the material modes. Every living entity is a spiritual spark, part and parcel of the Supreme Being, and by the kindness of the Lord, for the Father is kind to His sons, the individual living beings are given a little freedom to act according to their will to lord it over the material nature, just as a father gives some playthings to the crying child to satisfy him. The whole material creation is made possible by the will of the Lord to allow the bewildered living entities to lord it over things as they desire, although under the control of the agent of the Lord. The living entities are exactly like small children playing the material field under the control of the maidservant of the Lord, nature. They accept the Maya, or the maidservant, as all in all, and thus wrongly conceive the supreme truth to be feminine, goddess Durga, etc. The foolish, childlike materialists cannot reach beyond the conception of the maidservant material nature, but the intelligent grown-up sons of the Lord know well that all the acts of material nature are controlled by the Lord, just as a maidservant is under the control of the master, the father of the undeveloped children. The parts of the body, such as the senses, are the creation of the Mahatattva, and when they are assembled by the will of the Lord, the material body comes into existence, and the living entity is allowed to use it for further activities. This is explained as follows. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is, again, another brilliant purport explaining this profound verse. And in this purport, we understand why the scientists don't really understand anything. They're dumbbells. They're stupid. They have no real intelligence. They're just spewing out speculation. And your children are exposed to it every day. And you're exposed to it. But you take it as if it's normal. It's not normal. It's demoniac. It's wrong. It's misleading. It ruins people's lives. And they waste their time running after money and sense gratification because they've been programmed like that day after day, year after year in these nonsense schools. And unless we wake up and reject these schools, reject this science, reject this false idea that the purpose of life is to enjoy the senses, and to enjoy the senses one needs money, to have sustained sense gratification, and the hell with death, we will solve that also with science. That is nonsense. And unless we understand this, we also will go along with it and ruin our lives, and ruin our children's lives, and ruin Krishna consciousness. We have to reject this. Just like the other day we heard, someone asked Prabhupada, what does it take to be Krishna conscious? Prabhupada says, you must reject sense gratification. You must reject everything you're learning in the material world about sense gratification. And so this is difficult to understand because we've been conditioned life after life to engage in sense gratification. And because of that, we have an aversion to hear regularly Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita because it undermines our desire to have sense gratification. That's why people avoid coming to classes. They avoid listening critically. They'll listen as a matter of habit, but not critically. And therefore, they continue doing the nonsense and forcing their kids to be subjected to this nonsense. So here, Prabhupada explains that there are preliminary things that happen in the material creation. And that is, number one, all the species of life are created first. Now this is a gigantic difference from what Darwin says. Darwin says, oh, they evolve over time. No, they happen right away in the beginning of creation. And this is explaining how it happens. And then people, according to their previous karma, are placed into the different 8,400,000 species. Just like first they manufacture the car, then you buy it, and then you sit in it and drive it away. It's not that the car evolves over time and you evolve over time and everything is materially evolving. No, the soul is not material, but the body is material, and the body has to be developed. And it develops early on in the material creation, and here we're hearing how it happens. The scientists don't understand this. Their theories are all speculative. They don't understand that everyone is being controlled by the three modes of material nature. They think they're independent. They think that they are in control, and that they can control nature with their so-called science. So this is the first and foremost thing we have to understand. And this is explained in Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, verse 30, where it says, Prakrityaiva chakarmani kriyamanani sarvasa yapasyati tatatmanam akartaram supasyate. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. Now, how many people do you think understand? How many devotees understand this? That everything we're doing, we're being forced to do it. You're eating, you're passing stool, you're working, you're sleeping, you're waking up, you're bathing, you're picking your nose. All these things are being forced. You're not in control. I'm not in control. Nature is in control, and is controlling our body by the three modes of material nature and time, and also by the development of lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion, and envy. So, this body is made by material nature under the direction of the Supersoul, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body are not his doing. You're not doing anything. You're being forced. I am being forced. Whatever one is supposed to do, either for happiness or for distress, one is forced to do because of the bodily constitution. The self, however, is outside all these bodily activities. This body is given according to one's past desires. To fulfill desires, one is given the body with which he acts accordingly. Practically speaking, the body is a machine designed by the Supreme Lord to fulfill desires. Because of desires, one is put into different circumstances to suffer or to enjoy. This transcendental vision of the living entity, when developed, makes one separate from bodily activities. One who has such a vision is an actual seer. This is the fact. This is the truth. This is the reality. And very few people in this whole world understand it. Even you hear it, that doesn't mean you understand it. You understand it, or we understand it, when we engage fully in devotional service and do not compromise at all with the material nature, with Durga Mata. We cannot compromise with her. But she's so clever that she tricks us every time. And we are willing partners in this trickery, unfortunately. So the body is a machine to fulfill material desires. Well, this is explained. Ishvara Paro Sarvabhutana Hriday Serijuna Tistati Ramayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rani Mayaya, 1861. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart. Ishvara Sarvabhutana, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. So as soon as you're seated in this machine, everything you do is controlled by material nature. But we think we're in control. And we think that we can control nature through science. But these are all false concepts. It's impossible. That's one thing we have to understand. It is impossible to control nature by science or whatever. It's impossible to be in control of our own body by engaging in sense gratification and listening to nonsense theories. However, it is possible to engage the body by using one's intelligence and mind in the service of Krishna. If we become convinced, I'm not this body, I am the soul, and the soul is the eternal servant of Krishna. therefore the body and the body and the constitutional position of the soul is to be always engaged in the service of Krishna. Then one can be liberated. So we see, like for example, I was speaking yesterday about Bhakti Churu Maharaj, because he disappeared a year ago. So I was explaining, first of all, his name, Bhakti Churu, means, one is, Churu means beautiful. One becomes beautiful because of devotion. That's his name. Prabhupada gave him that name. So, by devotional service, one becomes beautiful. One becomes liberated also from the cycle of birth and death. One becomes knowledgeable by engaging in devotional service. So, you don't become knowledgeable by studying speculations. You become, or modern pedagogical teachings by nonsense people who are mostly all demons. You become knowledgeable by engaging in devotional service. This is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. And if we engage in devotional service, then knowledge and renunciation naturally develop. You don't have to try for knowledge, you don't have to try for renunciation. By just engaging in devotional service, and devotional service means, number one, hearing and chanting in the association of bona fide devotees. That's number one, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasa, Sevanam. So there's hearing and chanting in the association of devotees, just like we say every day, Srinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hirdayantak Stoi Badrani Vidunati Srihitsatam. That the devotee is always engaged in hearing and chanting about the Lord. And by doing that, he becomes enlightened. Enlightened means Krishna will give you the knowledge, will reveal it to you because of our constant engagement in devotional service. So in the purport to 1861 it says, Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. In other words, this is the only, let's say, discretionary power we have. Either we accept Krishna or we reject Krishna. Either we follow Krishna's order or we don't follow Krishna's order. That's the limit of our free will. There's no other free will. That's it right there. Either we accept or we don't accept. And that's why Krishna says, Sarvadharmam pranityaja mahamekam saranam vraja. You should not only accept, but we should all surrender completely to Krishna. And the proof that we have surrendered is that whatever Krishna says, or Krishna's representative, the pure devotees, Srila Prabhupada, that's what we do. And that's what we promise at the moment of initiation, right before we receive our beads. We promise to do certain things and not do certain things. That means that one is engaged then in devotional service. So there's two facets, what you should not do and what you should do. If you only do what you should do, but don't refrain from doing what you should not do, then they cancel each other. But if you follow both, what you should not do and what you should do, then you become Krishna conscious. You cannot do one and not the other. You have to do both. So, it says, Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. Lord Krishna instructed that the individual is not all in all. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, or He Himself, Krishna, as the localized supersoul, sits in the heart directing the living entity, the living being. After changing bodies, the living entity forgets his past deeds, but the supersoul, as the knower of the past, present, and future, remains the witness of all his activities. Therefore, all the activities of living entities are directed by this supersoul. The living entity gets what he deserves and is carried by the material body, which is created in the material energy under the direction of the supersoul. As soon as a living entity is placed in a particular type of body, he has to work under the spell of that bodily situation. A person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car, although the living entities, the drivers, may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the Supreme Soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity so that he may work according to his past desires. The living entity is not independent. One should not think himself independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The individual is always under the Lord's control. Therefore, one's duty is to surrender, and that is the injunction of the next verse. Do they teach surrender in school? No, they don't teach surrender in school. They teach you that you're independent. They teach you that it's possible eventually to control death and control material nature by science. And therefore, they're focusing kids to learn science. See, the SAT, what is that all about? It's their fake science. It's all their fake speculations. And you're supposed to study all that fake stuff and pass the test and get some degree to be idiot number one for the rest of your life. See? So, therefore, one's duty is to surrender, and that is the injunction of the next verse. Tam eva saranam gacha sarvabhavena bharata tat prasada param santim stanam prapsyasi sasvatam. O Skayana Bharata, meaning Arjuna, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Are we teaching our kids this? Surrender? No. By the time they graduate high school and college, they don't want to surrender anymore. I'm not saying everybody, but most cases it's like that. They say, I don't want to go to temple. Why are you forcing me to chant Hare Krishna? I don't want to chant Hare Krishna. And I want to go out and do a sleepover. And I want to date. I want to have a condom. I want this. I want that. All that is signs of no surrender. And this is happening regularly. Just like at the program last Sunday, after I spoke, Srinivas Kedan said, what he said is true. There's so many Vaishnava families, they call me, and their problem is that their kids are not, do not want to be Vaishnavas. And they're having so many problems with their kids. Did you hear that last week? Yeah, you see? That's what's happening. And it's going to happen to us also unless we wake up. We got to get our kids away from these schools. The schools are ruining them, and because they have them in prime time. You don't have them in prime time. You have them mainly when everyone's running around trying to eat something and then doing homework and then going to sleep, then waking up, and you have to wake up and go to work, and they have them in prime time. From 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to around 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's prime time. And they're drilling them with this nonsense speculations, false theories, and all kinds of values that are based on sense gratification, not based on Krishna consciousness. They're not teaching them you should surrender to Krishna. They're saying surrender to Dr. Joe Biden. Surrender to critical race theory. Surrender to gender neutrality. Surrender to feminism. Surrender to eat, sleep, mate, and defend like an animal. That's what they're teaching them. And you have no control over it. So we should take control. We should reject it. We have to say, listen, no, we're going to cancel material education before they cancel Krishna consciousness. This should be our goal, to cancel material education and replace it with spiritual education. So this is spiritual education. Prabhupada says, a living entity should therefore surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart, and that will relieve him from all kinds of miseries of this material existence. By such surrender, not only will one be released from all miseries of this life, but at the end, he will reach the Supreme God. Do we believe this? Prabhu, do you believe this? Prabhu, do you believe this? Huh? Yes? No? Maybe? You don't? Okay. That's an honest statement. Because if we believed it, we would instill it into our children. That is, a living entity should therefore surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart, and that will relieve him from all kinds of miseries of the material existence, of this material existence. By such surrender, not only will one be released from all miseries in this life, but at the end he will reach the Supreme God. The transcendental world is described in Vedic literature, Rig Veda 1.22.20, as Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Suraya. Since all of creation is the kingdom of God, every material is actually spiritual. But Paramam Padam specifically refers to the eternal abode, which is called the spiritual sky or Vaikuntha. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is stated, Sarvasya Chaham Hridhi Sanivistaha. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart. So this recommendation that one should surrender unto the Supersoul sitting within means that one should surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna has already been accepted by Arjuna as the Supreme. He was accepted in the 10th chapter as Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. Arjuna has accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the supreme abode of all living entities, not only because of his personal experience, but also because of the evidence of great authorities like Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa. This is what we should teach our kids. And, they'll say, oh, but if I don't go to school, then how am I going to get a job? Oh, believe me, you'll get plenty of jobs. How did Prabhupada get a job? Yeah, he started his own business. And he did pretty well. And then the business went bankrupt by the mercy of Krishna. And then he did even better. He took sannyas and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. He started with nothing and ended up with a billionaire, right? And without doing business, simply by spreading Krishna consciousness. So if you become a billionaire by spreading Krishna consciousness, and by the way, he was not attached to the money. He used all the money in Krishna's service and went back to Godhead. So this is the other point I made yesterday, that Bhakti Churu Maharaj was, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, but those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, having fixed their mind upon me, O son of Prita. For them, I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Te samaham samudarta, mrityu samsara sagara. So, Prabhupada, so Krishna delivered Bhakti Churu Maharaj after he performed his essential duties, that was completely translate the Srimad Bhagavatam in Bengali. Then make a movie about Prabhupada's life and work and all he achieved in spreading Krishna consciousness. That was a big project. And then opening up the temple in Ujjain, establishing the deities, and establishing also a project in the United States, and also establishing other temples in Bengal and other places, and then initiating so many devotees, and then spreading Krishna consciousness around the world, just like Prabhupada did, and he was supporting what Prabhupada did. So he was called. He was quickly, te samaham samudarta, mrityu samsara sagara. But those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Prita, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of mercy. And in the purport, Prabhupada quotes a verse from Varaha Purana. He says, Nayami paramam stanam archir adi gatimbina garuda skandam aropya yatacham anivarita. The purport of this verse is that a devotee does not need to practice Astanga Yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planets. By the way, Astanga Yoga is virtually impossible to do in this age. There's a school of yoga in Seattle, in Capitol Hill, called Astanga Yoga. What they're doing is nonsense. It's not real Astanga Yoga. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord himself. What responsibility? To transfer the soul of the devotee to the spiritual planets. He clearly states here that he himself becomes the deliverer. Te samaham samudarta mrityu samsara sagara, right? A child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once, riding on his bird carrier Garuda, and at once delivers the devotee from material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from this material existence. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. This is amazing information. Do we believe it? That's the question. Do we actually believe this? If we did, then that would mean the imperative of teaching this to our children. Are we teaching this to our children? Well, I don't think so. That's the tragedy. I don't think so. But it is possible to do. We just have to be convinced ourselves. When you're convinced, then you can do something. If you're not convinced, you don't do it. Okay, so, yeah, we are convinced I should chant Hare Krishna. We are convinced I should take Krishna. We are convinced we should jump up and down kirtan. We are convinced, only some of us, that we should preach actively and go out on Sankirtan. So as we keep saying things, it starts eliminating people until it's almost zero. But we should be convinced of this, what we just read, that Krishna will swiftly deliver us from the material nature and the cycle of birth and death, and take us back to Godhead. And that is the purpose of the whole Krishna consciousness movement, to facilitate that. Therefore, Krishna says, Sarvadharmam parityaja, mam ekam saranam vraja, aham tvam sarva pape vimoksisyami mastucha. Give up all other processes of self-realization and simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life, because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of him. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Let everyone take shelter of the Supreme Omnipotent Godhead, Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. So now this is the major difference between material education and real spiritual education. Material education is trying to convince you, you are the doer. You can control your own destiny. You can order nature. There are these stupid New Age so-called gurus, and even Christians, they say, you have to order nature. Order meaning you give them an order. Do this for me. Look that up. How to order nature. How to order nature for one's happiness. Does it say anything? it's a technique of yoga by the nonsense people. Does it say anything? Or how nature can be ordered by one's will. No. Okay. How to willfully order nature. Look that up. How to willfully order nature. So, we can't order nature, but we can surrender to Krishna, who is in control of nature, who controls Maya also. Maya is not independent, or Durga is not independent. Although Hindus, the hodgepodge Hindus, they believe that Maya, or Durga, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that she is the Supreme God. This was and this was the curse on Bengal by Paramahansa Ramakrishna, so-called Paramahansa. He was also another nonsense. He had some mystical powers, that's a fact, but he was a nonsense. And he thought that Durga is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there are many people, Punjab, South America, South India, North India, East India, West India, they think that Durga is the Supreme Goddess. So this is also nonsense. That completely is opposite to what Vyasadeva saw. He saw that the material nature was standing behind Krishna, like the shadow of the Lord, or in the shadow of the Lord. She is not in control. She can only do things because of the will of the Lord. Do you find anything? Okay, all right, I'll find it. Read it tomorrow. Okay, so this is just Prabhupada says, just as a father gives playthings to a crying child to satisfy him, the whole material creation is made possible by the will of the Lord to allow the bewildered living entities to lord it over things as they desire, although under the control of the agent of the Lord, meaning Durga. So everyone's under the control of Durga in this world and being forced to do things, but yet everyone's making theories that they are in control, that they can order, or they can willfully order nature to supply them whatever they want. And this type of philosophy is crazy. It's completely opposite to Krishna consciousness. But this is what's being taught by modern so-called gurus, and whether it's in Christianity or in Hinduism, and they're misleading people in a major way. And because of that, there's no real understanding of what our situation is in this world. So therefore, Prabhupada says, they accept the Maya, or the maidservant, as all in all, and thus wrongly conceive the supreme truth to be feminine, or goddess Durga. The foolish, childlike materialists cannot reach beyond the conception of the maidservant, or Durga, or material nature. But the intelligent, grown-up sons of the Lord know well that all the acts of material nature are controlled by the Lord, just as a maidservant is under the control of the master, the father of the undeveloped children. So this is the fact. This is what we have to understand. Did you find something? No. Okay. So, are there any questions about this? Yeah. Yep. Wait, read that again? That last sentence. What you just read, that last thing. Okay. No, I'm going to explain it. This is very simple. This is explained in the 18th chapter. Where it says, 1 second, let me just find it. '18th chapter, 17th verse, Bhagavad Gita. It says, one who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. In this verse, the Lord informs Arjuna that the desire not to fight arises from false ego. Arjuna thought himself to be the doer of action, but he did not consider the supreme sanction within and without. If one does not know that a super sanction is there, why should he act? But one who knows the instruments of work, himself as the worker, and the Supreme Lord as the supreme sanctioner, is perfect in doing everything. Such a person is never in illusion. Personal activity and responsibility arise from false ego and godlessness, or a lack of Krishna consciousness. Anyone who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Supersoul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though killing does not kill, nor is he ever affected by the reaction of such killing. When a soldier kills under the command of a superior officer, he is not subject to be judged. But if a soldier kills on his own personal account, then he is certainly judged by a court of law. So this is the whole point. Man proposes, God disposes. So what you just read proves that the individual is responsible when they're acting in a state of illusion, and thus they get the reaction. Whereas if an individual is surrendered to the Lord and only acts under the direction of the Lord and his representatives, pure representatives, then he's not responsible for his actions, and he's not doing anything. He's simply acting under the order of the Lord. But a person who's bewildered and is inspired by sense gratification is the doer and will get the result. That's what that is saying. You see, so when we say, when we say that they're being forced to do, that's the point. When they are attached to the body, they're no longer in control. They're being forced to do things, and they are the doer in that sense, because they're going along with it. Just like if you get into an airplane, whatever happens to the airplane will happen to you. So if the airplane crashes, you also crash. You can't stop it, because you stepped into the airplane. So as soon as we act in a state of illusion, we are responsible for what we do. God is not responsible, although you're being forced to do it, but not by Krishna, by the material nature. That's why the verse, there's a verse that says, 13th chapter again, verse number Karya karana kartritve hetur prakriti uchyate purishastra kudukanam bhokritve hetur uchyate. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. This is an extremely profound verse, and it means that when the living entity desires in a state of bewilderment to enjoy independent of Krishna, he is responsible for what happens. The Lord is not responsible. Material nature will force the living entity to do things, but the living entity still can make decisions, and then will be held responsible by the laws of karma. That's why it says the living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments. The nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. So, that is 1321. So the individual is the doer when he's in a state of illusion. But actually he's forced to do it. The cause of his suffering. Yeah, he gets all the reaction because he's a doer. In that case, but he's a doer in a state of illusion. It's very subtle. It's explained in the 5th chapter, 15th verse. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. And in the purport it says that the Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul, as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not therefore omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute, independent, living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare the Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell. And then it says, the living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell as a cloud is driven by the air. So everything depends on the desires. If we desire to be independent of the Lord, and that's what they're teaching you in school, to be independent, you go to hell. Doesn't matter you chant Hare Krishna sometimes. You're going to acting in a state of illusion means that you're acquiring karma, and then you get a mixed bag, some good and some bad, but you're forced to take birth again. It might be a prominent birth because you did some devotional service. You might be able to start from the point you left off and make more advancement. Or you might go back to school again in the next life and be totally bewildered and go down. So you see, this is dangerous. Life is a dangerous thing in the material world. And unless we can inform our kids about this, you're basically pushing them over the cliff by not explaining it. First of all, we have to understand it, right? We're having difficulty understanding this right now, right? But you can see how subtle it is. And everything depends on the desire of the jiva, and the desire has two choices: either we accept Krishna's instructions or we don't accept, or we half accept. That's called Mishra, Dr. Mishra. Half accept everything. In a state of illusion. When he desires in a state of illusion, he is responsible. That was the verse that we read, 18:17, where it says, but one who knows, personal activity and responsibility arise from false ego and godlessness or lack of Krishna consciousness. So when we falsely desire things, we're responsible. On the other hand, anyone who's acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Supersoul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though killing does not kill, nor is he ever affected by the reaction of such killing. Okay, but there's not responsible. Personal activity and responsibility arise from false ego and godlessness. The Lord takes charge of the devotee when he surrenders and saves him from false desires and falling into Maya. But if the devotee wants it, eventually the Lord gives up. He says, okay, you keep thinking about it, now you can have it. Yeah, no, you can be doing right, but still desiring wrong. The desires have to be 100% right all the time. No, but I'm saying it's possible to be chanting Hare Krishna and still desiring wrong. No, we don't desire pain and suffering, but we do desire sense gratification, even though we're chanting Hare Krishna. No, that's the sign that you are still subject to karma. No, well, you can always, let's say you buy a lottery ticket and you win. And then next week you have a toothache, you have to go to the dentist. So those are all karmic reactions. All karmic. But see, the devotee is sincere, or he or she is sincere, the Lord will protect the devotee, even though there are dangerous situations. Just like getting COVID. If you're a devotee and you're following the rules and regulations, Krishna will protect you. And if you're half devotee, half karmi, then you get half COVID. Right? So it all depends on our desires. Everything depends on the desire. So it is possible to be chanting Hare Krishna but still desiring sense gratification. That's why we need to hear every day to purify the residual sense enjoyment that may still be, that it's a subtle thing. It's called hutam. Hutam means these subtle desires or attraction to sense gratification. But that'll go away also if we constantly hear. Just like you're hearing now, right? You're coming every day and hearing. Every day there's something being discussed that's new, or another aspect of the philosophy that you might not have understood, or we might not have understood, and Prabhupada's clearing it up. He's purposely bringing up these different points. Yes. Who follow the teaching faithfully. That means completely following. Okay. So, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I was going to talk about communism again, education. Yeah, subtly they're what you would call conditioning the brain to think in a certain way, and it's all based on sense gratification. They're conditioning kids to become sudras the rest of their life, begging for jobs, and being consumers. You have to buy all these gadgets and things, otherwise, you're not really advanced. Where it's all unnecessary. It's all unnecessary. You don't need any of these things. The cell phones, the Tesla car, this house, that house, this gadget, that gadget. We're just collecting all these things. They're entangling us, and we think we need them because we've been programmed like that in school. You don't need any of these things. All you need is chant Hare Krishna, protect cows, grow your own food, live a simple life based on Krishna consciousness. That's all you really need. You don't need anything else. But we're convinced that we need all these other things, and it complicates life tremendously, and it leads to all kinds of frustration. Haribol. Seven already? Wow. How did that happen? Okay, Mr. Surya, I gotta wake up. Yeah, I know. Is it your birthday? You want a birthday present? You want a birthday present? Yes? Oh, okay. I thought you didn't want it, but now I know you. It's one second.